Good. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. So this workshop today is going to be a very kind of bird's eye overview of the SBIR and STTR programs. We do, through our New Mexico Pass program, provide more topic-specific workshops that cover things like agencies and budgets and things like that, where we go into the really nitty-gritty details. But this one is more of a 101, just high level, what are the programs and how might you fit? So what are the programs? SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR is Small Business Technology Transfer. The goals of these programs are really to meet federal R&D needs by providing research dollars to small businesses. So these are programs that are mandated by the federal government for agencies, and you'll see this in the next couple of slides, who have extramural R&D budgets over a certain threshold. So right now there are 12 different, 11 agencies, 12 departments who do participate in these programs. And really the government's looking to kind of spur technological innovation, provide startup and seed funding for early stage technologies. So that's why I really like these programs, because you're not really going to find another source of early stage funding that is not going to take any equity in your company. And these slides I'll send to you after the presentation, so you have them. So some more specifics on the SBIR program. Again, it's equity-free investment in your company. It allows you to demonstrate the feasibility of your idea. So a lot of times when you come into a phase one, you don't really have a prototype yet. These programs allow you to kind of do proof of concept and figure out, is this commercializable, and then move forward. It also allows you to start building a team, which is really important in a number of different circumstances. And then it can also help provide due diligence for follow-on funding. So especially organizations like angel investors, venture funds, things like that, they like to see companies who have been awarded SBIR because it shows some traction in that technology or innovation. So quick overview of the actual program. It's about a $2.5 billion set aside per year. Again, so 3.2% of the extramural research budget has to go towards these programs. And that's for agencies with a budget over $100 million per year. And we'll get into what exactly those agencies are in a minute. So in 2018, it was actually $2.7 billion that went into that, just the SBIR programs. This chart down here is just a chart that kind of shows how the percentage has increased. So it's been steady for the last couple of years, but since FY11 it's increased quite a bit, and that's just the percentage that has to be allocated towards these programs. Now the STTR we call it a sister program. It's very similar to the SBIR program. It's much smaller, so only 5 agencies participate in it, and that's because it's for those who have $8 billion or greater budget per year with those extramural R&D funds. So last year it was about $290 million that was set aside for STTR. And STTR, and again we'll get into this in a little bit, is where you're going to be contacting, for example, Ian, if you wanted to work with LANL, because it does require a research institution to partner with on those grants and contracts. So the primary differences between SBIR and STTR, and one of the things our program does is kind of sit down with you and figure out which one is more advantageous for your company. But for SBIR, the partnering requirement, you don't have to partner with anybody if you don't want to, but you can. With STTR, you have to. So you would have to partner with LANL or Sandia or a research institution. So most universities count as a research institution. But again, if there's someone you have in mind, we can always go and make sure they qualify. The PI under SBIR has to be employed by the small business under SBIR. Under STTR, usually they can be employed by the research institution. NSF is the only agency that does still require the PI to be employed by the small business. But all the other agencies, the PI could be employed by state lands. The work requirement for SBIR, so this kind of goes back to partnering. So you can outsource up to 33%, and you don't have to, but that's kind of the threshold if you wanted to. STTR, at least 30% has to go to the research institution. So it's very similar. There's just that requirement of you have to with an STTR. The IP requirement under SBIR, obviously no formal IP requirement is necessary because it's, you're working with yourself. For STTR, you do need that IP requirement and that agreement in place, because if any IP comes out of the grant, you're going to want to have an agreement in place with the research institution you're working with. And so that's why if you're even semi-considering STTR, we like to start much sooner, because those can tend to take a little bit of time to get into place. For SBIR, 11 agencies, 12 different departments participate in the programs, and then only 5 participate in STTR. Again, that's because of that larger R&D budget requirement. And then the program size, SBIR is much bigger, $3.2 billion approximately in FY19. STTR was about $453 million. Yeah?
I would add that even though SBIRs are 8 times bigger than STTR, my experience is the odds are the same, just because so many fewer people talk to STTR.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and a lot of times the agencies will drive you towards STTR if it looks like you're going to partner with an institution anyway. And a lot of the agencies, the topics are the same. Some they're not, but a lot of them, the topics are the same, whether it's SBIR or STTR. So they'll drive you towards STTR because the chances of being awarded are much higher. So the participating agencies, all of these that are listed are participate in SBIR. The ones in gray are your STTR. So the STTR, DoD, DOE, HHS, which includes NIH, NASA, and NSF. So those are the 5 kind of big players. And then all of these other ones, so USDA, under Department of Commerce, this is where it kind of gets confusing because they're one agency, but they've got 2 programs, NIST and NOAA underneath them, and they have separate SBIR programs. One thing we always like to tell people when we're kind of talking about, and when we introduce the agencies, is we talk about the SBIR and STTR programs as if they're 2 different programs, right? But really, it's like 12 different programs, and even more than that if you factor in STTR, because every single agency has different requirements for how they want their proposals submitted, different requirements for just about everything. So while they're all lumped under SBIR or STTR, you really need to go and figure out, okay, I'm going to apply to NSF. NSF has all of these requirements. DoD is completely separate. You're going to need different registrations, different setup, everything, basically. And then what we like to say now, probably within the last year, even within agencies such as DoD, the different components within DoD have different SBIR programs. So Army differs from Navy, which differs from Air Force. And a really good example of that is the Air Force is now moving towards, they want to rapidly contract with small businesses and cut that time down. And so they've introduced what they call open topics, which are like they say, that they're open. You can pitch anything. They require a pitch deck instead of a traditional proposal package. And they cut down the actual proposal narrative to 5 pages. So you submit a 5-page technical narrative of, I think it's a 15-slide pitch deck, and that's your SBIR proposal package. They also decreased the funding to that to $50,000, and we'll get into the funding levels in just a minute. But the unique thing about that is, even though it's a quicker kind of in to get that government contracting, it still qualifies you for the phase 2 funding, which we'll also get to in a second. So I'm not going to go over all of this because I'm going to send the slides, but this just kind of gives an overview of things that the agencies fund very generally. The one thing I will say, and we'll get into this more when we talk about grants and contracts, is agencies like NSF, they're interested very broadly. Is what you're working on innovative? We probably want to fund it. DoD, on the other hand, is much more specific, and so they're going to want to fund things that can help the warfighter. So they have very specific problems they need solved. A lot of their SBIR and STTR topics revolve around those very specific problems. So again, this will be available after the presentation. So some agency differences. Generally, the submission process, like I said, can differ. And I say can vary, it does vary. And it varies quite a bit. And this can be everything from the format and layout of your actual proposal package to, the page numbers, what they expect from the content, how they evaluate. It differs from agency to agency. The funding levels obviously are going to vary based on the agency. The period of performance is going to vary. And then when they put solicitations out will also vary. So over here I've got our solicitation guide, which is this little handy sheet right here. And basically what this shows is a very high level overview of when you can expect solicitations to come or to open and close. We're always updating this. We usually update it about 4 times per year, I'd say, because again, agencies like to change things up all the time. But this is really handy if you're maybe considering applying to multiple agencies, so you can kind of time how you want to do that. So getting into how much money each agency has. DoD is obviously the biggest. They have a pretty big pot of funds to pull from for these programs. Last year, well, 2019 data is still coming out, but 2018 it was about 1.32 billion that went directly to small businesses for these programs. HHS is the next biggest, and then it kind of goes down from there. So you can see the smallest guys, like the Department of Ed, they've got small budgets, but they do still fund SBIRs, and we really like to highlight, especially like the Department of Ed, because they fund things that you wouldn't necessarily think of like high tech. So they'll fund things like innovative curriculum or things like that. So as long as it aligns with their mission and what they're looking for, the SBIR program is a pretty good fit. And again, that's something we can help identify and make sure that what you're doing aligns with what the agency wants. So this is the table. I'm not going to go through each one of these two, but it kind of gives a high-level overview of what agencies fund in a phase 1 versus a phase 2. So most agencies for the phase 1, it's about 100K up to 250K for the bigger guys. Phase 2 is significantly bigger, or more funding available, up to about 1.6 million for like DoD. And then along those same lines, for the period of performance, most phase 1s you can expect about 6-ish months to perform on your award. And for phase 2, almost all of them are 2 years, 24 months. The exception is Department of Defense with their Special Air Force topics that they introduced. So for those 50K awards, you have to perform on it in a 3-month period. So that's kind of the outlier right there. For data rights and IP protection, so this is one of the really kind of hallmarks of these programs, is you retain your data rights as a small business, which is pretty important. So you'll have full right and title to any of the data or IP developed under that SBIR award. The exception is if you're doing an STTR, you have to have that agreement in place with the other research institutions, so you may be splitting that IP depending on how that agreement looks. They just changed this at the end of last year. Before, the data was only protected for 4 years. Now they upped it to 20, which is great, from the start of your award. The government has limited use of your data. They do have rights to have a royalty-free license. In our experience, they never use it. It's mostly for evaluating the results of the award, but just know that they do have those rights. And then the USPTO, if you're interested in more of this, you can talk to us, or the PTO office has really, really good, very comprehensive webinars pretty regularly that go over all of this. Okay, so getting into the, I'll just do that. So the SBIR, both programs are what we call a gated or phased program. So you're always going to start with a phase 1, which can move to a phase 2, which will hopefully move to a phase 3. You can't do a phase 2 before you complete your phase 1. In very limited, there's some examples like DoD has some direct to phase 2s. So there are exceptions to this, but overall you usually have to do a phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. Your phase 1 is really concept development. Again, it's going to be anywhere from 50K to 256K, depending again on the agency. Anywhere from 3 to 12 months, again, depending on the agency. So know well before going into this, in case you are awarded, what that period of performance is going to look like in case you do get awarded. And usually it's about a 15% success rate for phase 1s. So they're very competitive. Going into your phase 2, that's kind of your full R&D, prototyping, things like that. That's why they offer a lot more funds for a phase 2, and the duration of that period of performance is much longer. The chances of being awarded a phase 2 are also much, much higher. So it's a 45% success rate. So usually if you complete a phase 1 and are in good standing with the agency and they like what you're doing, they're going to invite you to do a phase 2 and encourage that, and then that just kind of moves you down that pipeline. For phase 3, this is really your commercialization phase. There's no direct SBIR funding for this. So this is the stage where they expect that you're having outside funding coming in to help commercialize. The exception to that is for agencies such as DoD, where DoD would ultimately be your end customer. They may grant you a contract to continue, if that kind of makes sense. One of the kind of unique things about SBIR is, so say you get a, I don't know, DoD phase 1, but you decide you need to pivot and want to go to NIH or some other agency, you can still use that phase 1 to go straight to a phase 2 with another agency. So as long as you have that phase 1, you can go to a phase 2. We always encourage talking to a program manager at that agency to make sure it's aligned, but we've never had any issues with any of our clients doing that. Let's see. So any questions on the different phases? Yeah.
Actually, I just figured it out. Why do they consider there to be a phase 3 if they're not giving the funding as part of it? Just getting credit for it in some weird way?
Yeah, they like to think that all of the investment they put into the phase 1 and phase 2 is leading to this phase 3. I mean, if we wanted to really cut it off at where SBIR funding takes place, it's the phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What advantages of unlocking down, keeping your IP private with phase 3? Whereas if you end in phase 2, then your stuff can go public. So isn't there a thing with the IP that the main reason for phase 3 is to keep the IP private while you're commercializing the product?
It wouldn't matter, I don't think, whether.
I mean, that's what lawyers do, like that 4 to 5 year original thing, now 20-year thing. That mostly happens in the phase 3. Before you can keep that going that long is in the phase 3 part.
Yes, and let me get back to you on that because IP is not my strong point, but Del could answer that question.
Yeah, that's part of the phase 3 was, even though you're not getting money, you still don't have to publicly transfer that data over until phase 3 is over. That's what you can extend for that long period of time.
Oh.
So I believe that's what its purpose is.
Okay. And that would make sense.
No, I appreciate it. I've looked at a lot of these, but every time I see phase 3, I'm like, not quite sure why this counts as part of the program.
Right.
Because your research is publicly funded, at some point it has to become publicly available.
Exactly.
And what the phase 3 does is just gives you an extra window for you to get out, get your product
Before it's publicly available.
Yeah, publicly disclosed. Yeah. In my experience, there's 2 things that go with phase 3. One is if you have not commercialized something after your second or third phase 2, they'll start telling you guys you're not going to get any more equipment.
Right.
Do that. And so, even though they're not paying for it, SBIRs. You don't have to do much. You have to raise $500,000 or so, or kind of get some sort of commercialized. The other thing is if you get I don't recall if it's a phase 1 or phase 2, but that will count as a competitive solicitation such that you can sole source later on. And that will show up as a phase 3, especially if
so you can sole source after just even a phase 1. Yeah.
So that's
with any agency. So it wouldn't even need to be DoD. You got a USDA or even Department of Ed. Phase 1, you could sole source to DoD if you wanted to. So that opens up a lot of doors for that too. Okay, so one of the other things we really like to kind of cover with SBIR is there are granting agencies and there are contracting agencies, and then there are some agencies that do both. As if it weren't confusing enough already. So grants, generally, they're much less specific with their topic areas. NSF, again, is a really good example. Contracts are going to be like your DoD, NASA. They're very highly focused topics. Again, we have this very specific problem or need that we need to solve for this aircraft carrier, whatever. We need a technology that can solve that. Grants are much more flexible, while contracts are not. So contract is more like a binding agreement between a buyer and seller for goods and services, where grants, again, like NSF, they're a lot more flexible. I find in the entire proposal process, it's just easier to work with grants. Contracts are nice too, but grants, again, flexible. The PI has more freedom in defining the SOW with a grant versus a contract. And again, that's because in the contract, you're trying to fulfill a very specific need or address a specific problem, things like that. So there's not a lot of room for being super creative, if you want to put it like that. There's more flexibility in the use of funds with grants. Contracts are very often based on deliverables and milestones, and there's a lot more fiscal requirements with a contract. For a grant, it requires your best efforts in research. Contracts, it requires the delivery of promised goods or services determined by that contract type. So again, much more structured with contracts. With grants, the questions and answers about the solicitation are not made public. So this is kind of interesting. You can go and talk to someone at NSF at any time. They'll answer your questions, talk to you, keep it private. For example, with DoD, there is a very short window where you can talk to them and it won't be made public after a certain cutoff date. They have a web platform where they publish all of the questions and answers that come through, and it's publicly available to everybody. So a lot more rigid in that sense. And then last, the applicant defines the scope of work under a grant. Under a contract, it's usually the government who's kind of dictating what that scope of work is going to look like. And this is generally, so the agencies who participate in both of these. So contracts are going to be DoD, NASA, Department of Commerce. So again, that's NIST and NOAA. Although NOAA just changed and NOAA went over to grants. So this is one of the things that's really frustrating about these programs is agencies like to change how they do things often. So NOAA is actually over at grants now. And then you've got DHS, DOT, and EPA. So they're all contracting agencies. Your granting agencies, NSF, DOE, and USDA. The ones who do both are HHS, so your NIH, and then IES, which is your Department of Education. I don't know why they do both, but they do. So you just have to really look at the solicitation when you're going about it and then seeing if it's going to be a grant or a contract. So this is one of the things we also like to include in these presentations because it can trip so many people up, and this can really make or break your proposal if you do not have your required registrations in place before you submit. So each agency, again, because they like to do things differently, has a set of registrations that they require before you can even submit a proposal. All 12 agencies or departments do require 3. So your DUNS, your SAM, and then your SBA company registration. All of these are free. If you're even considering applying for SBIR in the future, we recommend getting these knocked out right away. They're free, and some of them, like SAM, are taking quite a while to get processed now. So now SAM requires a notarized letter, and it's just a really painful, long process. So you don't want to wait until the last minute to get these completed. And then as you can see here, all of the different agencies also have a slew of other registrations they require based on the agency. So we included it so that when I send it out later, if you know you're interested in an agency, you can just come back to the slide and be like, okay, I need to make sure I get all of these registered for. And then it continues on this slide. So, okay, so getting into what these programs fund. So the kind of the backbone of both of these programs is innovation. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean high tech, right? So I brought up the Department of Ed example where they fund curriculum, things like that. We've seen examples like there was one company who developed I guess you could call it curriculum, but basically they had PTSD patients creating comic books to kind of be an outlet for dealing with their PTSD. That was funded via SBIR, things like that. So it's not always going to be your traditionally very high-tech technologies. Innovation comes in all shapes and forms, so it could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a process. It's really pretty flexible and broad. So that's another one of the things that we provide as an assistance organization is really looking at what you're doing and then determining how does that fit within what SBIR, STTR funds, and then what agency is best suited to apply for based on that. And then it can start anywhere in the product idea chain. This is just kind of general innovation stuff. So this will be available again later. And then the other thing that they're really looking at more so now, even I would say within the last 3 years, they're putting a lot more emphasis on commercialization early. So before, you wouldn't have to really think about commercialization too much. You would, but you wouldn't have to have a really solid plan until your phase 2. Now a lot of agencies are looking for that in your phase 1. So if you're thinking about applying, really start thinking about how are you going to commercialize this? What's your market? Things like that, because the agencies are starting to pay attention to that a lot more. This we kind of covered. So for granting agencies, the end user will be the public. For contracting agencies, usually your end user would be the government. Not always, but generally, if you're going through the DoD pipeline, you'll often have DoD as your end customer at the end. So in your proposal package, they really want to understand your commercial potential and your path to market. And again, so they're paying a lot more attention to this now. And that's kind of where, like the Air Force, they're requiring that pitch deck, which is really unique for SBIR, but it's been working well for them. They've been funding a lot of companies through that. And that's been gaining a lot of traction. So we anticipate seeing a lot more of that coming up. So going over some SBIR funded companies. These are kind of the bigger ones, but companies like iRobot and Sonicare, 23andMe, they all started as SBIR startups, and they grew to be very, very successful large companies. So that's the ultimate goal, right, for these programs, to see that kind of commercial success. So this is another example, innovation at DoD. So iRobot, they had 30 DoD awards between 2001 and 2009 that totaled over $10 million. 17 of those were SBIR Phase 1 and 8 SBIR Phase 2 awards. The thing about SBIR is that you can keep applying for SBIR to work on, say, the same technology, but different pieces of it, if that makes sense. So they're not going to fund you over and over again to do the same work, but they will fund you to address different technical challenges you may have with that same technology. And that's kind of the case with iRobot. And this is how they started. So this is how iRobot started for DoD. This looks more along the lines of what DoD would be interested in rather than a robotic vacuum cleaner. But they were able to take the work they did with SBIR and transition that into something that's commercially available to the rest of the public. All right, so going into the kind of the proposal process, again, this is a very high-level overview. If you're interested in applying, we have much more detailed documents and things to kind of help you through it. But generally, your first step, determine if you're even eligible. In New Mexico, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be eligible as a small business. That just means you have less than 500 employees, which most people do. You do have to be for-profit, so it does not fund nonprofit companies or organizations. Primarily U.S.-owned. All of the work does need to be done and completed in the U.S., and then the PI has to be primarily employed by the small business. Again, exceptions are the STTR program, where that PI allocation can go towards the research institution. So the second thing is, ask yourself, do you even have an innovative idea or technology that might be funded under the programs? So that's something, again, we can help determine. The agencies have on all of their websites, a lot of them have flows and processes that kind of talk about what they like to fund. And online at SBIR.gov, you can see there's records of everything that's ever been funded under SBIR. So you can kind of get an idea there too. You'll want to obviously complete your registrations. Again, the 3 big ones that we say to just knock them out as soon as you can. Done, SAM, and the SBA company registration. And then after that, figure out which agency you're going to apply to and then register for those as well. Next step generally is you're going to determine a topic fit. So with contracting agencies, again, it's going to be very specific. Does your technology fit within what they're looking for? For others like NSF, we can almost always fit your innovation or technology within the scope of what NSF funds. So it's just trying to align with their mission and really make sure it's a good fit under there. And this is also kind of where our program can help you determine which agency you should prioritize submitting to first, because you can submit to more than one. At that point, you're going to start putting together your proposal package. This differs largely based on the agency again, but generally you can expect some kind of cover page, some kind of budget cost proposal, and some kind of technical proposal narrative, whatever the agency likes to call it. And then once you have your entire proposal package together, we always recommend having it reviewed. So we offer professional reviews. We also contract out to professional reviewers so they can review it for you as well. And we have funds available to help you do that. And that's advantageous for a number of reasons. Mostly you really want to get that third-party look at your proposal. So after that, you're going to submit. We'll say this over and over and over again, but at least one day before, preferably more, there always are technical glitches and things that happen right up to the deadline, so the sooner you can submit, the better. We have a lot of experiences where the submission site will just crash the day it's due because so many people are trying to submit at once. So as soon as you can submit it, just get it over with, and we can help with that as well. And then you wait. So depending on the agency, you can wait anywhere from 3 to 6 months, sometimes sooner. Like we just had a client who was awarded an Air Force contract, and he learned it was less than a month after he submitted at the beginning of February, and he heard maybe 3 weeks later. So it can be pretty quick. It can be, quite a while, depending on, again, the agency. So now this is kind of our final part of the presentation, but what does the New Mexico FAST offer? So our program is funded by the SBA to provide free proposal development support to small businesses, and that support is very broad. So we do everything from workshops like these to one-on-one assistance and helping you put together your entire proposal package. This map here is kind of a visual example of who we serve. We serve the entire state. NMSU is the land grant institution for New Mexico, so we have a mission to serve all 33 counties, and we do. And again, we're housed at Arrowhead Center, which is NMSU's economic development arm. We also house the IP and Tech Transfer Office for the university, and we have a number of other kind of complementary programs and things that you can leverage against your SBIR. So a lot of, especially with the focus in commercialization now, going through one of our project accelerators is really valuable too, because then you kind of come out with a with useful data that you can use in your SBIR proposal. So if anyone's interested in that, let me know. I'm not going to go through all of this. We offer basically anything to do with putting together a proposal package, we will do. Something that, and we'll get into, I think I have a slide dedicated to it, but we do have what we call MicroGrants. So that's up to $2,000 available to clients for additional support. So that can be anything from if you need to work with a grant writer to help scope and write, things like that. You need to work with an accountant. Maybe you want to go to the National SBIR conference and need travel funds. We've been really pushing that lately because it's so valuable for the small business to go. So again, basically anything that could help with proposal development, we will entertain for those funds. Let's see, we're going to get into those a little bit. I would encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter. It has all of the most up-to-date information on all of the agencies, events, things like that. I think we're going to get into some of this other stuff, so I'm going to skip over. This is a very scattered diagram of kind of what it looks like to work with us on an SBIR proposal package. And it's not to scare you, but we like people to kind of visually see how much time needs to be dedicated to putting one of these together, because it's a lot. You're applying for a federal grant or contract, so it's not, it's not a small thing, and it's a lot of money at the end. So we generally say if you've never put together one of these proposal packages, to allocate at least 120 hours to put together a comprehensive proposal package. Again, that can be more or less depending, but generally it's about 120 hours is what we've seen. So from the intake all the way through, and it keeps going, to submission, that's kind of a visual guide of what you can expect from us if you decide to work with us on a proposal package. And again, all of our services are free. So one of the things we developed, and I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we started developing what we call a living library. And the reason why we developed this is kind of funny, but we found that we would get emails from people at like 3 a.m., 2 a.m., like frantic, like, oh my God, I need this, and we're obviously not available to answer those questions. So what we wanted to do is create a really comprehensive resource library for people, so that if at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning and we're not available, you can go to this and hopefully find the information you need. So this library consists of lots of different things. If you go to our website, we've got pages dedicated to each agency. So there's agency information there. We have a number of really, really boring SBIR videos that you can watch. They're very informative, but SBIR is kind of dry. But they're short. Most of them are 3 to 5 minutes long, and they cover a pretty broad range of specific topics that could help you at 3 a.m. as you're putting together your proposal package. One of the other things that we've developed that has been really useful are templates. So we have things like compliance matrices, checklists, proposal templates, letter of support templates, budget justification templates, all of those different pieces you'll need. And again, we tweak them for each agency, but those are really valuable as you're putting together that proposal package, and you can kind of work off of those documents. Those do get updated every single solicitation cycle. So we're always updating them because some agencies have multiple solicitations every year. And so we always make sure we have the most up-to-date information for everybody. Let's see. That covers that. Again, our YouTube channel. It's a great resource. I think we have 141 SBIR videos on there. There's a lot of archived workshops and things that are a lot more topic specific that are also archived. We've also developed playlists, so say for Department of Defense, where we throw in all of our DoD related videos. So you have one nifty, playlist you can go and watch. So that's really valuable for that. Again, I'm going to put that warning out there that they're pretty boring, but they're very informative. So, and we're always adding content. Okay, so our microgrants, we also call it a phase 0. We used to have set amounts for our microgrants, but we found that wasn't incredibly helpful. So what we did was we're capping it usually at $2,000, and then depending on what you need, we do a sliding scale. The way these work is we don't give the money directly to the small business. We work with a service provider, provide the funds to them, and then they provide service to you. The exception to that is if we're using it for, say, travel funds, we'll reimburse you for that. Again, I'm not going to go over this, but basically it covers anything semi-related to developing a proposal package. So very broad. These are just the things that we find are used the most. But again, if you think of something and it relates to the putting together your proposal package, we'll probably fund it. So to kind of close, some of the myths that we hear a lot, the program will get me to market quickly. It's not. It's still going to be a long process, but it is going to provide that kind of seed funding that's not readily available, and they're not going to take equity in their company when they do that. So it's really valuable in that sense. The program is the same across the board. I'm sure all of you know by now, for me repeating it over and over, it's very different depending on the agency, depending on SBIR, STTR. So what we recommend is just once we identify what agency and what you want to apply for, we can really narrow it down and kind of focus on, okay, these are the requirements you need to pay attention to. It's too difficult and not worth the money. It is semi-difficult, again, 120 hours, that's a significant amount of time, but I would say it's definitely worth the money because, again, they're not going to take equity, and it's a decent amount of funding to get your innovation moving towards market. And then lastly, it's convoluted and there is no guidance. It is convoluted, but there is lots of guidance available, especially through our program, and a lot of agencies are very open to talking to small businesses about the program, about their fit. Ian at Lano is very open to talking to you about if you're interested in STTR. So there is a lot of guidance available. You just have to reach out. And we're also always happy to facilitate those connections. So we have contacts at all of the different agencies we can connect you to, things like that. So there is lots of guidance. So finally, why pursue it? It's the government seed fund program. The dollars are risk-free. There's no equity taken. You retain your data rights, which is important. Oh, I didn't update this. That should be 20 years and not 4. They just changed that. Again, it's a priority position for sole source sales to the government. So that's a really big one. And especially, again, you don't have to do a DoD phase 1 to sole source to DoD. You can do any phase 1 and still sole source to DoD if they're interested. And then you have no black marks for up to 75% failure rate. And with that, that is it. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. There's some handouts over there if you want to take. And yeah, does anybody have questions?
So when you get rejected, obviously they let you know, but do they also give you like feedback on, you know, this is what we're looking for, this is not what we're looking for, and you screw this part up?
Yep. So again, depending on the agency, every single agency will provide the opportunity for feedback. Some will just give it to you. Some you have to request it. Some will even do like an in-person or phone call debriefing if that's what you would like to do. Most of the time, we see rejections based off of like it wasn't, for example, for contracting, if what you're doing is not exactly aligned to what they want, you'll often get rejected. For agencies like NSF, they may say that what you're doing is not innovative enough. So that's why what we do to kind of mitigate that is we really encourage you to talk to the agency before you submit or before you even start working on the proposal package, so you can get that feedback before you put in those 120 hours. And all of the agencies are open to doing that. And that, again, that's another reason why we really encourage going to the national conference, because they send representatives from all 12 SBIR and STTR programs, and usually multiple representatives, and they give you the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with them through one-on-one sessions, and I think they're usually like 20 minutes long, 15 or 20 minutes long. So you can go talk directly to the agency, and they'll say yay or nay, or maybe like if you tweak this, we'll be interested, or things like that.
It even seems open enough to where I'm working in the world of the arts and entertainment, that there's a channel I can follow to take advantage. I'll definitely want to talk to you.
Yeah, and so that's where where kind of our expertise comes in, because the agencies contact us, say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how our priorities have shifted or whatever. So we tend to have the most up-to-date information, so we can sit down and help you determine, okay, where do you fit, things like that.
And so something I should just email you when you get back home?
Yeah. Shoot me an email. The other thing I didn't mention on here, which is worth mentioning, so you can submit pretty much the same proposal to multiple agencies. The caveat with that is if, say, NSF decides to fund you, and then maybe USDA also decides to fund you under that same proposal, you couldn't do that. You'd have to pick one or the other. In very, very, very rare circumstances, if the agencies really want what you're doing, they may split it, but that's so rare. I don't even know if it's worth talking about, but you can submit the same proposal to multiple agencies. Obviously, it'll be a little bit different because each agency has their own set of requirements for what you submit, but that's also an option. So, again, this is very high level. We do have workshops that get into the much more detailed specifics of different parts of the SBIR process. And if you sign up for a newsletter, they're usually listed.
So it's mostly located down in Las Cruces?
No, we go all over the state. So I'm actually based in Santa Fe.
Okay.
But our main office is in Cruces. But we do workshops all over the state. We do webinars often. So this is actually being recorded right now, so this will go up and be archived. So it's always, the content's always accessible. Okay. Any questions? Email me. I have cards with me here. And then I think my contact information might also be on some of those handouts as well. So, thank you.